Welcome to Email and Coffee. I'm Joy Brooks, and today I'm joined by Jess Nadeau, writer and independent researcher specializing in ancient history, mythology, and magic. From Egypt to the fall of Troy, today we're tracing the threads that connect ancient wisdom to modern life. Prepare for a journey through time that reveals we haven't changed as much as we think.
I'm Jess Nadeau. I am a writer and independent researcher. I study mainly ancient history, mythology, ancient magic, and ancient literature. Right now, I mainly do freelance writing. I wrote for Ancient Origins for about a year or two, and now I have my own Substack publication, and I also write for another Substack creator as well on a regular basis. So that's where I'm
at. Which was the one you said, Ancient Origins?
Yeah, Ancient Origins. They're based in the UK, and they have a website, a pretty large platform, over 1 million readers, and they do articles on ancient history, mythology, ancient mysteries, all sorts of things. So I wrote for them for some time, and now I just have my own Substack publication I'm trying to focus on. But I'm also helping another creator who I also worked with while he was with Ancient Origins as well. So
cool.
And that would be you.
Who's
and that was Petros.
Oh, it's Petros.
Yeah.
Go ahead, say his whole name so that people can know, because he was on my show.
Petros Katoupas. His Substack is Digging Up the Past. He has a couple others as well.
Yeah, he's he's a wealth of information. There's a lot of interesting historians. Do you know who Pete Kelly is? He's in the UK.
No, I don't.
He does very long, very beautiful videos of Greece. I mean, he's been to South America a lot. He actually had a Flint Dibble on the show. So I was like, oh, dude. And then there's another UK show that I watch, the Prehistory Guys. They also they do like a weekly. They read archaeological news, current archaeological news about digs and things of that nature, and it's all prehistory. And they have done in the past, and they often do tours. But they go, and they sometimes take people, but they go, like they just came back this summer from one of the tepes. And it wasn't, I mean, they went to Göbekli, they went to Karahan, they went to a bunch of different tepes, but they went all across the coast of Turkey. They went to Ephesus. They went to a few different places. So there's a whole bunch of interesting, different historical venues on YouTube these days.
There really is.
Do you listen to anything that anybody that you want to share? Obviously,
not really. I mean, I spend a lot of my time kind of looking into researching and looking into kind of the ancient authors and things like that. So I don't really have much time for like checking out people who talk about it right now.
You go down professional rabbit holes.
Well, yeah. I mean, I have a job, a day job, and then at night I'm usually doing research, or I'm writing, or if I have free time, I'm just doing reading or playing video games.
I like to I do the same thing. I research. Right now I'm researching late Bronze Age Levant.
Mm-hmm.
And I have that, as a reminder on academy.edu or one of the professional news.
Oh, okay. Yes, I've heard of it.
And they ping me with articles, and they're dry toast. Dry, but they're fascinating. They're, exactly what I want. So it'll come back to me and I'll have a paper that's, talking about, right now I'm learning about villages and towns in the Levant, politically, late Bronze Age.
Okay.
And I would say this one's all Bronze Age. So it's talking about how, it's basically talking about the population. Was it Egyptian? Was it Canaanite? Was it Hittite? Was it,
Well, it was kind of all over the place.
exactly.
There was a lot of flux happening during that time, and especially after the Bronze Age collapse, things just kind of got really, I want to say, chaotic for a while.
One thing that I remember reading was that there's a point where they didn't have walls, and then they put up walls, and it's like also there's Egyptian frontier, and then Hittite frontier.
Mm-hmm.
They clash.
Yeah.
And a lot of things happen politically wise, but also some of the local townspeople, well, the kings and queens of the local Levant, would play the Hittites against the Egyptians and the Egyptians against the Hittites.
Yeah.
So it was just, when I start reading about these things, some of these places just like leave us alone. And other places are building up, big walls and acropolises and making a big deal about it and trying to align themselves with the right families. And, meanwhile, there's herders. It's just, as I read the different articles, it's pretty fascinating. And it's sometimes it gets into language, and then sometimes it gets into religion. So, it's sort of all over the place, the articles that I do get. So that rabbit hole, once I get into it, it's like 5 miles wide. It's very narrow going down the rabbit hole, and suddenly it's 5 miles across. So,
well, I guess that's fitting considering the time period.
Exactly.
There was just so much going on. I've looked into that time period for Petros a couple times because he likes that time period, and it is just full of so much just people moving around and people kind of assimilating with other groups, and then you have the Assyrians coming up and kind of taking over different areas, and and when you look into like biblical texts too, there's a lot of flux there too, as their people were kind of moving into that area, and they had conflicts. Obviously, they all did. Everybody was just kind of fighting over the land, trying to make a place for themselves.
There's a lot of overlap in culture.
Oh, there definitely is
a lot of overlap, and when you start looking at the culture as it's evolving, and even the language as it's evolving in the late Bronze Age, it's pretty fascinating, because what's happening during the Bronze Age is the known world, and the known world, pretty much went to India. Between we've got eastern, north, all the top north and east of Africa, the entire Mediterranean, including England, the UK. We've got Europe, then Greece, the Levant, we've got the Black Sea. So we're going all the way in Asia up to the Russian hinterlands. So
Yeah.
Eastern Europe and Western Russia, and then all the way over to India. And all of these people are walking and getting on boats and going hither and thither. What I heard very recently was that they're finding that England was more involved in bronze, the tin trade, than is recently conjectured. So there were actual boats going around the Mediterranean. Exactly how they got to the UK, they could have gone around Spain, the Iberian Peninsula, and then gone, or they could have, landed in France, whatever.
Oh, yeah, that would probably be the likely. Yeah. Yeah.
And there was a viable trade market going on. So it was international trade, which basically means culture is spreading all over the place. And it wouldn't be so surprising that somebody in Egypt would perhaps know of an Indian priest, and like an Indian priest may know of a Greek philosopher. It's not surprising to think that these things wouldn't necessarily happen. Not only did they know intellects, but if you were a merchant, it wouldn't be unusual for merchants to know of other merchants. A man who's making tools and getting tin might know of their connection in the UK. And the point is that it was very, very international.
Mm-hmm.
And it totally broke down.
Well, yeah, and you also have like historians and political figures that were traveling around as well.
Yes.
And even though some of their accounts of foreign lands were a little outlandish and fantastical, they were still spreading out, and there was still cultural diffusion happening. And you can see that a lot in their own cultures. They'll adopt certain things, certain just aspects of their culture, and like you said, the trade aspect as well. That's really evident, especially in archaeology. You'll find a lot of that.
One of the reasons why one of the reasons why we don't have a lot of information is because writing was not necessarily democratized.
Mm-hmm.
So the scribes might be religious scribes, government scribes, merchant scribes.
Yeah.
So
not
writing down parcels of land.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who were literate.
Joe Blow is not necessarily writing letters to his mother. That's not something that happens. What he would do is he would tell a messenger. Joe Blow would say, listen, I'm going to give you so-and-so amount of money, or 5 loaves of bread, whatever. 5 loaves of bread and some beer. If you could go to my mom and tell her that my wife just had a baby. I mean, that's what they were doing. So most of it was oral. There was written language,
mm-hmm.
and it was evolving. And it was either on clay or the walls or stone. And anything that was paper wasn't a big thing at that point.
No.
It was stone or clay. So and that that requires expertise. So it's basically oral, and when the shit hit the fan, we lost all that oral history.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, 900, 800 BC. So the late Bronze Age-ish, 1185-ish. So 3000 to 1100. Let's just say 1100, something like that. That's the Bronze Age. 3000 to 1100, something like that. 1,000, whatever. And then, it's like, what happened? I don't know. Well, where are these people?
Yeah, exactly.
Anybody rebuild it?
A lot of things happened. A lot of things. You had the people migrating over who were causing a lot of destruction and chaos, or at least that's what they said. And then you have a lot of environmental factors too. I think they said they recorded a lot of earthquakes, flooding, whatever. Just completely uprooting everyone.
There's a term for it. It'll come to me. It's like the perfect storm.
Yeah,
exactly.
it just
culminating. It just kept, people. If you have a famine, people are going to start to migrate.
Yeah.
So if people start migrating, and the famine gets worse, then you've got disease, because now people are hungry. There's no food, and people are spreading their germs all over the place.
Yeah.
So now you've got famine, bad weather, earthquakes, migration. So and the area itself was Egypt was at, what do they call it? The New Kingdom?
Maybe I don't think it was quite the New Kingdom yet. Wait, was it? It might have been the Middle Kingdom. I think it was during the Middle Kingdom, I want to say. Yeah.
It's Ramses. Ramses was.
Well, Ramses was part of the New Kingdom. Yeah. Okay. So maybe it was.
Ramses is basically at the point of Ramses the third, which is the second was Ramses the Great.
Mm-hmm.
Ramses the third is his son. Egypt is no longer that incredible. It's incredible, but it's no longer that incredible culture that it was. At that point, it's not degrading. It's consistent, but now it's getting, after it comes back from the middle, from the Egypt's probably the only empire or country that makes it out of the late Bronze Age.
Yeah, they were relatively unaffected from the Bronze Age collapse. They were able to fend off the sea people when they came. But the rest of the regions, the Mediterranean regions, were heavily devastated by it.
Right. But Egypt is not, it starts its, I don't want to say decline, but what's happening is Greece is doing this.
Yeah.
And Egypt's, slowly, and then Rome over here is, Rome's all the way down here, but now Rome is doing this too. So Egypt is beginning its slow decline. Yeah. However, now we'll segue into Egypt. Egypt is so much of a foundation of the area, other than all of the other Eastern, like the Mesopotamian, the Syrian, the Hittites, the Mitanni, the Persians. They've got so many names. I could go on and on and on. They're to the east, and we've got Egypt in Africa, the tip of Africa, and it's all the way down to Ethiopia, all the way up, and
they kind of pushed their way east for a while. Yeah.
They have their vassals west and east.
Mm-hmm.
So, Egypt is big, and it's so influential in so many ways, culturally, architecturally. It's a big deal. Now, we've got so many other things that are going on. Obviously, we've got many civilizations with the megalithic tombs and all of these things that were probably happening simultaneously in Egypt, but Egypt was doing their thing, their unique thing, and building it up. And what I find interesting um, about Egypt is how they integrated their religion, their government, their building, everything. Their, and the religion, their spirituality, and the topic of magic comes in, their health. It all gets incorporated very interestingly in the fabric that is Egypt. You can't necessarily say, oh, we're going to talk about Egyptian magic and not talk about their religion or their food or their government, or their bread baking. I mean, you can't just take Egyptian magic without talking about their entire culture.
Yeah, it was like that with a lot of ancient cultures. Magic was deeply intertwined within most aspects, especially when it comes to the religion, obviously, but also within their medicine and even science. When you think about it, magic is kind of the original kind of scientific exploration, and people may not agree with that, but it takes the idea of wanting to understand something better, wanting to have some kind of control over the environment, over each other, or just to kind of see certain patterns in the world and ascribe meaning to them. It's all comes from a similar place of curiosity, of wanting to understand something better.
The Egyptians were very interested in balancing order and chaos.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is it? It's a bot. What is it? What is the
Ma'at.
term?
If I'm saying that correctly, I'm really bad with pronunciations.
Because I did make a little notes about that because it's not, it's Mott. What's the other one?
Oh, their word for chaos? Oh gosh, I don't know off the top of my head.
I think I have it here somewhere. The Egyptians understood Heka as a primordial creative force.
Yeah. I think I would more associate that word with magic. With their with magic. Heka was magic.
And they, it's one of those, whether people want to, hate the word or not, it's one of those binaries where it's like in their mind it was either order or chaos.
Yeah.
And in many ways, everything was built upon getting that order.
Yeah, maintaining order. So there wasn't really any concepts of like good or evil necessarily. It was just order and chaos. And you see that a lot in their pantheon too. A lot of their gods and goddesses are oppositional to each other, but not necessarily in a good and evil way. Like you have Osiris and Seth. You have Isis and Nephthys, who are twins, but Nephthys was like the darker side of Isis. But she wasn't a bad goddess at all. And Seth, I mean, he does get kind of a bad reputation, more so when the Greeks came in and they really kind of defined him as evil. But prior to that, he was a force of chaos, but he wasn't always necessarily seen that way. Seth and Nephthys were one of them. They were married, just like Osiris and Isis was married. But Nephthys and Seth were actually some of the first deities to help Ra cross the barge at night through his journey through the underworld, the sun's journey.
When the Greeks get a hold of Egyptian culture, they Hellenize it because the Greeks are hung up with virtue.
Yeah.
And goodness.
Yeah. And you see a lot of that in there, especially in their aspects of magic. Most of the magic texts that we have are from the Greek magical papyri, and that a lot of that is very Hellenized Egyptian magic. So it's hard to kind of separate them. It's hard to understand like what's purely Egyptian magic and what is Hellenized Egyptian magic. I know that at least Egyptians, like perhaps their magic was more focused on medicine, medical purposes. There's a lot of medical texts that incorporate magic. All of their medical practices kind of incorporated some form of magic, usually associated with Horus or Isis, since they were associated with healing. So.
And they operated. I mean, they weren't just like sprinkling things.
They were quite advanced, I would say. And they had a lot of really interesting remedies for things as well. I mean, some of them you're like, oh, I don't know about that. But they, that's just how it was for them. They had magical medical remedies for everything.
You studied in school to become this practitioner. You just didn't, mom and dad, I want to be, a priest. Oh, okay. You're a priest. Boo. You had to go to school.
Yeah. Yeah. Or I'm sure to some level it was probably an inherited position as well.
I mean, of course there were midwives. I'm not saying, but even still, the midwives needed to practice. It wasn't as organized in a school, but it,
more so probably like a priesthood. Yeah.
You definitely, the women would definitely learn from another woman that was accepted in the village as the midwife.
Yeah.
And then there were physicians as well. So a midwife was not considered a physician, and a baby's birth would not go to a doctor. It would go to the midwife.
Mm-hmm.
And, the concept that we have of magic is not necessarily how they would foresee the world. So although, we call it different terms, we call it different things. So we'll attempt to manifest something, and that's okay. We don't call that magic.
Yeah.
But they would try something, and that would be magic. So, a lot of things that we name something else, we might not necessarily think it as magic, but they would.
Yeah, and not only that, but little things. Little things were magical. Like when someone died in Egypt, they would create the Shopti figurines to be their servants in the afterlife, or they'd create a boat for them so they'd have something to sail on. And we don't necessarily think about that as magic, maybe more so closely associated with manifestation. But there's all these little things that just were incorporated into their everyday life, into their lives and deaths, that were magical, maybe not so much in the sense that we see magic, because a lot of times magic is kind of, I don't know, it's kind of I don't know the word I'm looking for. It's seen as something that's like unordinary and strange and not real, or perhaps like the way that the media or Hollywood may portray magic as being like over the top. But to them, it was just part of their everyday life. And kind of is, but we just don't see it that way. Like when we pray, when we do rituals for different religions, like all of that in its essence comes from magic. People may not agree with me, and I know there are some religions that kind of frown upon the idea of magic or just the word itself. But really, there's a lot of little things that we all do in our everyday life that would have been considered part of magic back then.
Well, that's sort of, I agree with you that, some people may get upset if they're religious, but the rituals and the traditions that they're following are compendiums of things that happened thousands of years ago. They're reenacting in an updated fashion.
Yeah, and they just call it
It's exactly
something
what they used to
different.
do
It,
back
it
then.
really is. It really is. The invocations, trying to reach your some divinity, a god. It's still kind of just the same thing, just adapted and changed to fit like a
Right.
new group of people.
Um, and that's not to say that it didn't get dark, but I don't think that magic was like we think of it as, the white witch and the black and the dark witch.
Yeah.
We think of it that way. And although they could do bad magic on someone.
Oh yeah,
So
curses were very common, especially with foreign adversaries. In Egypt, they did all kinds of things to try to curse their enemies, or they would write their enemies' names on pottery and break it, or try to curse their name, or just completely remove them from existence.
it's exactly, those are the types of things that they did. That's exactly what they did. They one of the things that Egyptians did was, historically speaking, if they lost a battle, there would be no history. It wouldn't exist. Like, there was no battle. No, that didn't happen.
Yeah.
But if they won the battle, it's all over the place.
Yeah.
It's on
Yeah.
every stele, everywhere. So and many times there's no mention, or if they lose the battle, they may decide to call it a tie or whatever. The Egyptians didn't like to talk about losing things.
Yeah.
So that trickles down to everything that they do. In the case that, if they're not successful, it's sort of bad magic to continually talk about it, because it just talks about something that was bad.
Yeah, because to
It's
talk about it, to depict it, they had this idea that when you depicted something, when you talked about it, you could bring it into being. So they were very careful about that. They were very careful about how they depicted things, how they spoke about things. And to them, even the name itself was magical. So they were very careful with that as well.
Names, right?
Yeah,
All
they
those
had
things.
a lot of the pharaohs had, well, all of the pharaohs had multiple names. They had secret,
Names.
they had their personal names that not everybody necessarily knew, but they had like the names that they would be called by the others, or their name that would be associated with a god. And then even the gods themselves, like when you're looking at Egyptian magic, or at least from the magical papyri, but a lot of the gods, they all had secret names. And these names would be so ridiculously long and intricate, like I couldn't even pronounce them if I tried. And they would have like 10 different names that you'd have to pronounce for these spells, or when you die and you go to the underworld, you'd have to know the names of the gods or the deities that guarded the gates. And very, very specific instructions. And we know that from the coffin text, the Book of the Dead, that there was very specific instructions, but names are always included in that. So just the spoken word, just speaking the words, speaking the names, it could create something. It could manifest some type of reality for them. And so they would try to do it both ways. They would try to avoid certain things that could manifest something in a negative way, but also encourage certain things that could manifest things for their benefit.
Even naming a child.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Even naming the child, a lot of times the names were either associated with a god or goddess, of course. But some of them were more so like phrases. Like off the top of my head, I don't even know if it's a real name, but just an example, like my beautiful daughter, or something like that. Like he who is lucky to be born. I don't know.
But the thing is,
actual translated names, but
very similar. It's very similar Indian names to indigenous to American indigenous names.
Yeah, that's what it does.
Maybe horses.
It does remind me of it.
Right? It definitely does. Because first of all, I don't think that they named the baby immediately, because that was bad luck.
No, it was I believe it was usually like after they had the baby, they would name them. Because I mean, like we kind of like name our babies while they're still in our bellies half the time. We don't get to see them. A lot of times their names are reflective of how they were born, or
from what I remember, is that there was a waiting period from when a baby is born until it reaches a certain point, and at that point there's a naming day.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it would be called daughter number 1, daughter number 2, until it gets to a point. And even after that, daughters, they would be named daughter number 1, daughter number 2.
And some of that might have to do with mortality rates too, because I mean, back then, babies, it was probably the first couple days were probably crucial for their survival. So that does make sense for them to wait a few days in any case.
And that's why at some point the name that they get will reflect something, because now they've got a little bit of a personality.
Yeah.
So when the Romans named their daughters, it was like daughter number 1, daughter number 2. It was numeric names.
Yeah, or their names would be so like very closely related to like other figures in the family.
Right. Agrippa, Agrippina,
Yeah.
Like, oh goodness, is that the wife of, or the daughter of, or is that the granddaughter? But they would do that. Women in Rome didn't get named spectacularly. For not really. I mean, I remember learning that the name Felix is for a boy whose father has passed away before he was born.
Oh.
Okay. So Felix, which means lucky, it's because this kid is not lucky. This kid has just lost his father. So his name is Felix because he needs luck.
Okay. That's interesting. I didn't know that. I'm reading this book right now that takes place in ancient Pompeii. It's called The Wolf Den, and it's about like these women's experiences being slaves in a brothel, and their brothel master, his name is Felix. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, there are, the Romans, the ancient people name their children interestingly.
Mm-hmm.
And names could be changed easily.
Yeah, like if someone was adopted into a family, they would take the family's name.
That's right.
And if they free a slave, sometimes even the slave that they freed would take the family's name. So it was very important to them, like, there was, I think it was a lot, at least for the more elite members of society, like the family name came first, most importantly.
And you did say the slaves would often buy themselves freedom, and depending on the relationship with their master, they might
Yeah, because most of the time,
That's just me.
I mean, if they were born into slavery, they had who was their family. But some of them were taken as slaves, like, or sold by their family as slaves.
Right.
And they
It was
knew
very
the
common.
past, but they weren't connected with it anymore. I wouldn't be, you know, I wouldn't be connected with my past if my family sold me into slavery. So
Most
they would,
likely that's the point.
yeah,
Most likely that's the point. They sell you to slavery because they can't afford a daughter, or, you know, I mean,
yeah,
they can't afford, not only can they afford a daughter, they can't afford another mouth to feed, but a daughter has a bride price. So to get the daughter married, you have to pay.
yeah. And you have to have like a dowry, so to speak. Yeah. And
Yeah, dowry, not the
if you're
bride price.
really poor, then you're not going to have that. And sometimes these girls would be sold into slavery under the idea that perhaps it would give them a better life. But it usually didn't work out that way. Usually they would end up in households and very mistreated, abused in all sorts of ways, or they'd end up in brothels where they would continue to be abused. So it's really unfortunate for them.
It is because, you know, we are the weaker of the species, so, you know, that gets taken advantage of when it can
Yeah.
be taken advantage of. And even though, you know, boys were sold into slavery also,
Oh, yes. Yeah.
so, you know, the eldest would take the family fortune, and if there were other boys and there wasn't um, too many boys, or if, you know, one of the boys was not strong enough or whatever, they'd sell them into slavery.
Yeah.
You know, it was people were commodities back then.
Yeah. I mean, I do at least, not to say whatever, but at least they, some of them were able to earn their freedom. Because in some of the ancient cultures, that wasn't even possible. Like, if you were a slave, you were a slave for life. So some of these slaves were able to earn their freedom or were granted their freedom, and they were able to go on and get an education and kind of make lives for themselves. They did have universities that were specifically catered to um, newly freed slaves. So
The Spartan helot never had an option for freedom.
yeah,
But
yeah,
the Greek, you know, the Athenian slave, not only did they have an option for freedom, but they could be educated.
yeah,
So, for example, a woman could be educated to, you know, I don't know, to to teach dance or
mhm,
sew or whatever, you know.
yeah,
I mean, women things, but they could also be educated to read and write and teach the daughter how to,
mhm,
you know, assuming that the family wants their daughter to be educated, because the daughter would not go to school with the boys. The daughter would be taught by a woman. So sometimes they would have female slaves that learned, you know, knew how to sew. They knew how to play the lyre, the, you know, cymbals, could sing. You know, would read, and they would teach the daughters how to do that. So the daughter would be, you know, well cultured. And, you know, similarly, the males, some of them became athletes. You
mhm,
know, some of them became teachers. Some of them, you know, it was the mentality. First of all, people were commodities, and the mentality of slavery, depending on the society, was not what we consider slavery. It was sort of like, an, you
like
know,
indentured servitude. Yeah,
yeah, it's an unfortunate, you know, you're on the lowest level of society. It's unfortunate that you're there, but to some extent, you know, you got to push your own limits, but you could eventually save up enough money and move up
yeah.
by yourself,
But
you know, and
it still was very difficult in any case, because like the masters kind of had control over the money that their slaves were saving or getting, and a lot of times they would make it so it was nearly impossible for them to be able to buy their own freedom. But some, maybe not so much. Obviously,
I don't know about I don't know what the laws were in Egypt, but if you do read the Old Testament talks about slaves. They were forced to let them go after 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
So a slave couldn't be a slave for life, unless a slave wanted to be a slave. And there were specific laws. If you read the Old Testament, it talks about, on the Sabbath day, your slave rests too. So do your animals. Everybody rests. Today's Sabbath, I should be resting. Everybody rests on Sabbath day. And so those laws couldn't have come from nowhere. I would say that my impression is that they were inferred from different peoples of the area. So there was a certain amount of respect in some cultures to those people that were working. It's like, listen, they didn't have work like we have work, where you're a kid, you go to school, you learn stuff. What do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be this. Oh, good. There was some amount of that, but that's not the way it was. It was like, your father's a baker, you're a baker.
Yeah.
And if there was somebody in the family that was extraordinary, you would bring it to the temple. You would show the priest, this child is extraordinary, and the priest might say, oh yeah, and take the child.
Yeah, and they become part of the priesthood.
And
that was an honor for them, really. It really was. To be in the priesthood was a huge honor.
But, that child is now beholden to the priesthood. So, slave, what is it? Can't go back home and say, I'm going to bake bread now. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
It didn't work that way. So, getting a job in Egypt is not like getting a job in New York City. It bears no resemblance. And the concept of work, again, bears no resemblance. These days, my father owns a diner, the old Greek diner thing. My Greek father owns a diner. These days, Dad goes into, retirement, and the diner gets sold. But 50 years ago, that wasn't the case in America. If your Greek father came to America and had a diner, and you were the son,
that would be your diner.
It's your diner.
Yeah.
It's your diner. And you can think, oh, I don't want to do that, Dad. Maybe if you had 5 boys, one of the boys didn't want to do it, and the other boy maybe didn't want to do it, but maybe 2 or 3 of the brothers decided to, stick with it. That's that old mentality, and that's exactly what it was like.
Yeah. Well, it's been like that in most of the world for thousands of years. Like the whole caste system and all of that. Like it's just what your fathers before you did.
It's an organized way of instruction, of carrying on a necessary service or skill, and it's ordering it out of chaos. Because otherwise, again, these things that are oral get lost. So if I teach my son how to do something, he's a carpenter. I'm not writing, okay, Joseph, why don't you write a book about it instead of teaching your son, Jesus, how to be a carpenter? No, I think I'll just teach Jesus because I'm not writing a book. I don't know how to write. So I'm going to teach my son how to be a carpenter.
Yeah, you teach them to do the only thing you know how to do that you learned from your father and his father before him.
And if you
Yeah,
don't
it
do it
makes
too
sense.
well,
It does.
if you don't do it too well, you're going to be hungry.
Yeah.
And that's, that's the truth of it. So you try to excel at whatever it is you could do. And it's, I mean, we would look at it traditionally or culturally as being horrible, like, oh, that's terrible, there's no freedom. Which, yeah, okay, I get it, but it managed order and chaos.
Yeah. Yeah. And people didn't have the sort of resources that we have today where you can go to school and learn a new skill. I'm sure people could have, be an apprentice if they wanted to, but it was just the easiest way to continue going is just to do what you know best, what your family does. And it makes sense. It does limit people. And I'm sure there were people that kind of stepped out of those roles and tried to do something different and likely succeeded or maybe not.
If your father, if your father's a farmer, then odds are all the boys are needed on the farm.
Yeah.
So there you go. But maybe one of those boys has a specific talent.
Yeah.
And if his father is willing, I don't want to use the term smart, willing, he might take the boy and apprentice him out, saying, he may take the boy into the city and say, he is really good with wood. Really good. Son, show him what you could do, and then the local, the local carpenter would say, I'll take him as an apprentice.
Yeah.
And those things absolutely happen. But the point of the matter is, it was so different. It was so different than what we have, and it worked for so long. It worked for so long, and fell apart eventually. I would say, the next big migration that took the world by storm, the next migration, famine, weather, the next one was the fall of the Roman Empire.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that took the world by storm once again. And that's when, that system fell apart. But it sort of, feudalism is just another word for basically, you're a serf.
Yeah, the same thing.
It was palatial. The difference, and this is interesting because there's a similarity. The concept of the palace and the slaves is what was at the end, middle of the Bronze Age, because that's what Mycenae was. And a lot of the Greek Bronze Age cities. Well, I don't know what to call them. I mean, like Argos, Mycenae, Pylos. During the Trojan War, these great, and even Troy itself, these were built on the palatial system, where you've got a top rung and everybody else is below it.
Yeah.
So you're either fortunate or you're not. And that only goes so far. You can only work that so far. And that's sort of what happens after, 300, 400, 500 years after, as we're coming out of the Roman, 400 Common Era, as we start going into the thousands after, current era. That's the palatial system comes back into popularity. It's not a good system. It's not a good system because
it just doesn't work.
If the king is not a nice person, and he's got a bunch of sycophants around him, then the people just don't do well.
No.
You've just got a king and his nobles running rampant, raping, murdering.
Well, yeah,
eating,
and that's
warring.
historically, that's kind of what triggers a lot of societies to fall, is when people aren't provided with the resources that they need. And then you have such a huge imbalance between the rich and the poor. It creates a lot of internal conflict, and eventually that just erupts. It's inevitable, really. You can't push people so far and expect them not to lash out.
Right. It's my conjecture that that's the basic story behind the Trojan War.
Yeah.
That the woman's face who set sails without
and ships. I don't know.
Like, okay, whatever you might want to say that and blame it all on Helen, but
there's always more to it. It's a mythological story, but often, as we know, a lot of these stories are based on real events.
Oh, there's definitely something real about it.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely.
But what was it?
Exactly.
I mean, obviously political. I think Helen was just if she was even a real person or part of it, a very small part.
I was listening to, I'm reading SPQR, which is Mary Mead's book, and of Rome. And it just was talking, at this point, it was talking about the Romulus and Remus. So Remus is dead, Romulus is there, and the rape of the Sabine women that they had. That Romulus, I mean, this is like the myth. Romulus had invited all the dregs into Rome because he needed people, which basically meant, whoever he could get, and then realized I don't have any women, so I need women. So he had a big party and invited the Latians and the Sabines, and took the women, just took them, the rape of the Sabine women. And I'm thinking to myself, that sounds a little bit, it's a different story, but it sounds a little bit like what was going on between Greece and Troy.
Yeah.
And was there a marriage that, and again, I don't know about if the Sabine women were raped. Essentially, these are marriage agreements that go bad. And history, those days, you took two houses together and you married the girl with the prince or the noble, whatever, and that solidified these highfalutin.
Yeah, there's always political motivations behind it.
Right. So I'm thinking, okay, so we've got Asia, Troy, and we've got Greece, Mycenae, and then there's a marriage that went bad. Now, was she also married to the king of Greece, and then she fell in love with the king of Troy, or the prince of Troy? That whole story, it's made up.
It's hard to say because sometimes these stories kind of incorporate other stories. They're inspired by other stories. There's definitely truth to it because we found Troy. We know it exists. We know that there's evidence that there was conflict there. How that conflict was caused, I mean, you kind of have to just find the breadcrumbs left behind in myth. Because there are breadcrumbs there.
I think that, the entire Helen story for the Greeks sets up this tension between patricide, fratricide, and matricide.
Yeah.
Because it sets off all of these murders. Clytemnestra killing Agamemnon, Orestes killing Clytemnestra. All of these, it's then the story of Oedipus and his mother.
Yeah.
And his father killing his. So all of these, and it's very unusual. I don't mean to say unusual, but it's so unique to Greece that they're going through this. Similar, like I said, that the Romans are also preparing the story where the Romans are created out of rape. Is that what you're trying to tell? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
I mean, there was a lot of violence among the elites, especially back then. They were doing those things. They were killing their brothers and killing their mothers and killing, their cousins or whatever. There was a lot of that, and they were basically getting away with it. So I could see how that would be incorporated into the myth, and obviously some truth there to it. But it also kind of shows like this deep level of, when you look at those myths, you can see this deep level of like their understanding of not just like the familicide, but mental illness as well. I mean, their descriptions, Homer's description throughout the Iliad is so reminiscent of what real soldiers go through with PTSD. And Orestes and the rest of them being tormented and having all of these different symptoms and signs of like mental illnesses that we know of today. But back then they were just like hysteria or melancholia or something, they didn't have specific names for them. But I think when we're looking at that kind of stuff, it just kind of opens up this whole, it gives us a better understanding of like what is really at the heart of the myth. And it's what these people were actually going through at the time, whether they were real or not. I mean, Orestes could be like just a character created, but might have been a real person. There might have been real stories, but they just don't know who they are. They don't know their names. They're just part of just like the oral tradition, stories that are passed down.
But and I'm not going to disparage anybody's religion, but it's somewhat like the mystery behind Jesus. It's like there was a Jesus, but who and what part of that saga is fact, and what part is made up?
Well, I mean,
made up, but belongs to somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you look at it the same way that we look at Greek myths and Greek tragedies and dramas, and there's always truth, maybe not to all of their myths. Some of them, you could look at and say, well, obviously that didn't happen. But I think if we look at it in the same light, then there's always truth to these things. There's always, something that inspired it. And there's a lot of speculation that the story of Jesus was inspired by other characters, other wisdom teachers, or other sages that may have traveled and this and that. It's a common theme. It is. It's a common theme in mythology to have them, someone like that, someone who's a great sage and very wise. That doesn't take away from it, though.
A lot of myths are stories that have been compressed. Yeah. So it may be 5 stories in one.
Yeah.
That get compressed into one. Like there would have been 5 sagas, and over time those 5 stories get compressed into one. For example, the Iliad and the Odyssey. There were so many sagas. The concept of the Trojan horse is not part of the Iliad or the Odyssey. I don't believe. I do this to myself every once in a while. I'm like, wait a minute, where is the story of the Trojan horse? And I don't think it's in the Iliad or the Odyssey. It's a separate story that never made it into the final cut.
Mm-hmm.
But we know about it because it's a separate story. I'm wondering if it's in the Odyssey where he infers it. I can't remember.
Oh, I don't know either. I can't remember.
I have to look this up.
Yeah.
But I every once in a while I'm like, the Iliad does not end. Does not end with the Trojan horse. It ends with the hero dying.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the Odyssey starts where he's left. He's gone. Odysseus is no longer at the war. He's traveling away from. He's going back home and all the travels that he goes through. But there's no Trojan horse. Like, where is the Trojan horse? And I think he refers. I think someone in the story refers to it, but it's not like. And then the next day they all got into the horse. It's not the way it works. There are so many stories. Jason and the Argonauts. Theseus, all of these stories were separate, like anthologies.
Yeah.
And they were separate, but sometimes there were 15 versions of the story, and it got compressed into one story.
And it changes from person to person. You have different people writing about similar things. So it's going to change. And if they do, and when you think about ancient history, like, the people who wrote history weren't like the historians we have today. Like, they were just compilers of information. So they would just take what people told them, what they saw, what they experienced. They didn't really necessarily care if it was true or not, and half the time they may not have even believed some of the things that they were told, but they would write it down anyway because they felt like that was their job. And they would point it out. Herodotus, would point out, like, oh, I heard about this tribe in Africa of, hairy men that, or like men that have a giant foot or ears that they use as wings. I don't know. But there were so many tales that they told of these, like, bizarre people from parts of the world that they weren't familiar with. A lot of times these people weren't even people. They were just wildlife, like the great apes. Or different types of primates, or potentially just different types of animals that they had never seen before, or even tribes of people that they have never seen before, and they would give them these, like, animalistic traits. So when you think about it in those terms, like, that just kind of shows us that when people write about the past, they write about it from their perspective, which is limited. And if they're writing in a second-hand accounts, it's even more limited, because now you don't even have the opportunity to see for yourself. You're writing someone else's account, and sometimes their account is just going to be so out there that you yourself aren't even going to believe it, but you're like, well, I'm going to write it down because that's my job.
Yeah, the concept of history, I think Herodotus is the father of history.
Yeah.
But history in Greek means inquiry. Doesn't mean
it's
like thing. So he was, it's like inquiring mind. He's like, the newspaper, The Inquirer.
Yeah.
He's writing a story about things that he's asked other people about, or he's been asked, and he's writing it down. He's not writing it down as in, I want this for posterity. It slowly grows into that, so that, by the time Thucydides gets around. He's writing
and
history.
he was a different kind of writer. Like, he really wanted to get to the truth of everything. So there's a lot that we know about his writings, and even Herodotus. There's a lot of writings from ancient historians that are provable to some extent through archaeology. But it just depends on who they were. If they were more focused on being accurate and looking for evidence to support claims, or if they were just compiling information. And we can look at myths in a similar way too. It's oral tradition over time that begins to get written down in a way that's very similar to the way that historians recorded history. And they even kind of overlap. When you read ancient history, sometimes the mythical aspects just kind of overlap with it, the magical aspects. Things being magical or having magical powers or, being able to do magical things. It's just, it kind of overlaps. It's just how their worldview was. Everything was kind of like through this lens of myth, I guess you could say, a bit of their religion. And people still do that. Their worldview is kind of shaped by their perceptions, their religions. So we're really not that different. And I think what fascinates me the most about studying ancient magic and history and mythology is that you realize how similar we are, that we haven't really changed that much. We're still being inspired by their stories. We're still using their magic. We're still telling their myths. Their myths are what ultimately laid the foundations for our modern religions. So there's so much of us that is still part of them. And in a way, it's kind of magical in itself, really. We're always kind of looking
for who we are.
Yeah.
It's the core of what humanity is. We're still, we still need the same things. So we're telling the same stories that satisfy those needs. The words have changed.
But they're still, at their core, they're still kind of the same. Like when you look at the hero's journey, so stories that have been told from all parts of the world that weren't even necessarily connected during these times, and they all tell the same story. So there's something kind of innately in us that's drawn to this sense of wonder and magic. And I think it's very beautiful. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think it's just who we are. We're just curious, and curiosity is kind of the reason why we've done so much, why we've accomplished so much, is because our minds are so curious.
When I think about why, this is going to get into the patriarchy and the matriarchy. When I think about why some histories have to introduce, like Helen of Troy or the rape of the Sabine, right? If they start at that point, why are they starting at that point? That's a really odd place to start. But it's showing here again, the binary, the interplay between men and women in history.
Yeah.
We seem to think of it, matriarchy, patriarchy. We just created that. It was always a patriarchy. Always. It wasn't. There was always tension between the two sexes.
Yeah.
Always. And, whether they try whether, men tried to put women in their place and women just did it, or men tried to put women in their place and they let men think that they were doing it, whether, they fought against women, the Amazons. I mean, all these different stories. When you look at the story like of Jason and the Argonauts, right? So we've got Jason who is off to find the golden fleece. Mm-hmm. And in the process, he finds Medea. And now we've got this tension between this witch woman. She's a magician. She's a witch. And Jason, where he dumps her when he comes after he gets the golden fleece, after she helps him get the golden fleece.
Yeah.
He kills her father, or he helps her, whatever. He gets the golden fleece. They're off on the ship, floating off into the sunset. And by the time he gets home, he's like, okay, now I'm going off to find a princess. And Medea's like,
yeah, he kind of just took advantage of her like that. And she goes on to do the unthinkable.
She kills the kids.
Yeah.
So this is like a story, a tension story between the power plays between men and women. This is quite clear that it's not just a clear patriarchy. She was a horrible thing, but essentially, so does Clytemnestra.
Yeah. I think it kind of shows that like these, and it's often the case where when women in myth or even in modern day stories, when they exhibit too much power, they become the villain.
These are complex stories, and they're not so easily written off. This is what I feel. They're not so easily written off as an, patriarchy versus the matriarchy. We're still in that complex. We can easily oversimplify it and say, woe, the victim versus, those that are above. We can simplify it that way, but there's a tension that plays out every single day across the world between so many opposing forces, whether it's men and women, whether it's poor and poor and rich, educated versus uneducated, strong versus weak. There are so many, and I'm oversimplifying it here, but I'm saying it's very complex.
It is
very complex. And the myths are telling some of those highly complex stories that the Greeks understood.
Yeah.
They knew it wasn't a story about, Jason and Medea. They understood.
There's always these kind of underlying moral messages attached to all of them.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Aesop's fables. I mean, when we were kids, I was told the story about the ant and the grasshopper. Were you told that story?
No. I mean, maybe. I don't remember.
Yeah, I want to make sure. The grasshopper was slovenly and lazy, but the ant was industrious. So at some point in time, the ant has all the food, and the grasshopper comes to the ant and says, "Help me." So, it's a story about being industrious and making sure that, you plan for the future. But again, it's all of these little stories. It's not to say ants are better than grasshoppers. These are stories. Every time I hear any kind of a story, I'm always fascinated by it, even if it's today's news.
Yeah.
Right? They're stories. Like I'm always fascinated by who spun it that way? Yeah. Every story's going to be spun. What started World War II? Oh, about 20 different things. Which spin would you like to talk about? Because it doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
I don't wake up Monday and say, let's start World War II on Tuesday. It doesn't happen that way. It's very complex.
It is. Yeah.
That's why I love history, and so do you.
Yeah. I love the stories. I love how everything it's all stories. It's all magical.
Does it give you peace when you read the story and you sort of try to understand it from a different angle, or at least I'm spinning it because I'm going to tell you.
Yeah, or trying to kind of imagine yourself there, just being a part of it. There's just something deeply fascinating about the way that people tell stories and the way that they kind of the way that we've evolved to kind of see the world. Like, maybe not even evolved, the way we always have seen the world.
We have to tell stories. That's part of our social. Yeah. It's a requirement.
Yeah.
Because,
I mean, that's everything. Everything is kind of from storytelling. That's how we communicate with each other.
That is exactly.
That's how we see the world. Our minds are telling stories to us. We create our own narratives and our own stories.
That's right. That's exactly the point. And that's why our internal dialogue, our internal narrative gets externalized and then gets historically, it's like linear, but, it gets laid out on a line where, here's what I'm thinking now, what I thought yesterday, and what the whole world thought about it. And then, all the way out. And it's fascinating to me. I tend to be, how do I explain it? Like, people get hysterical about politics. And I look at it historically. I'm like, okay, this is what's going on. And times are, I get it. I get why you're upset. This group, that group, whatever group. I get why everybody's upset, but I'm in the narrative.
Yeah.
And I'm listening to both stories. And I'm in the middle going, I don't know which one's true. Where do I go?
Right.
I don't know.
Everything's kind of spun a certain
Everything's spun.
It is.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, there is at some level, there is a right and a wrong, and I'm aware of that. And again, that's where these great stories come from. This is the concept of these great stories, timeless stories, because there is an element of hero, right, wrong, order, chaos. All of these things, they don't go out of style.
No.
Ever.
No. They don't. And it kind of just shows that maybe this is just something inherently part of our human nature.
Oh, I could talk history forever.
Yeah.
It's been really good. I'm having a good time. Tell me, or tell Jess, tell everyone, tell everyone, if people want to connect with you. My dog's eating a Swiss chard root in the house. I'm looking down going, what is that smell? I'm like, okay, she's eating Swiss chard root. All right, it could be worse. I could say my dog is eating the carpet, but no. She's eating a Swiss chard root. Where can people find you? Or if they want to connect with you, how can people do that?
I do have a LinkedIn under my name, Jessica Nadeau. I also have a Substack under the name Jess Nadeau. And then I have a Substack publication. It's called Mythical Ancients. And you can find that on Substack. So check me out if you're interested. I'd love to share my writing with you and maybe hear from you.
I'll put the information below so that people can find it. It's been more than a pleasure.
Yeah.
And I'm sharing the kale root. Talk about magic.
Yes.
There you go. Have fun. Could be worse. I actually gave that to her. And my other one's going, where's my kale root? You don't eat kale. All right, girls. So, the dogs, I had a great time. And, history's my jam. It's my forever jam. So, I hope people will connect with you. And no fighting while I'm on the air. No fighting. All of a sudden, you're like, it's going to happen any second now. So, thank you so much. And
thank you.
As I say in the end, that's a wrap.